I never thought I'd be standing in the wreckage of a life built on lies, watching as the person I trusted most chose selfishness over our dying child. My name is Jacob Hollis, and I'm 37 years old. I wake each day in a house that once held a family, but now shelters just my son and me. Kara and I were supposed to face everything together, especially when Ethan's diagnosis came. Instead, she packed designer luggage for a wellness reset, while our 6-year-old son struggled through chemotherapy. My chest tightened with each poolside selfie she posted. I documented everything: the resort receipts, the champagne charges, the man named Norbert who appeared in her photos. Not out of bitterness, but because truth demands evidence. Some say forgiveness heals, but sometimes justice is the only medicine that works. Before I go any further, let me know in the comments where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow I will share a story you don't want to miss. But let me start from the beginning. The steady beep of Ethan's heart monitor had become the rhythm of my life. Day 4 of this admission, the second round of chemo, and the patterns were becoming familiar. Beep, pause, beep. I'd learned to hear the subtle changes, to know when something was wrong before the nurses rushed in. Ethan slept fitfully in the hospital bed, tubes snaking from his small body to the machines keeping watch over him. His skin had taken on that sickly gray pallor that broke my heart every time I looked at him. 6 years old, too young for the battle his body was fighting. I shifted in the plastic chair that had been my home for most of the past week, my lower back screaming in protest. The coffee in my hand had gone cold hours ago, but I sipped it anyway, needing something to keep me upright. Across the room, Kara sat scrolling through her phone, her expression brightening as she tapped at the screen. She hadn't held Ethan's hand once today. "Jacob," she said suddenly, not looking up from her phone, "I've been thinking." I watched her carefully. She'd been distant since the diagnosis, pulling away when we needed to pull together. "About what?" "I need a break." She finally glanced up, her eyes meeting mine. "I've booked a trip." I stared at her, certain I'd misheard. "A trip? Now?" "It's a wellness retreat in the Caribbean." Her voice took on that defensive edge I'd come to recognize. 10 days. I leave on Thursday. The monitor beeped steadily beside me while my own heart seemed to skip. Thursday was 2 days away. Ethan wouldn't even be discharged by then. "You're leaving while he's in treatment?" I kept my voice low, conscious of Ethan sleeping just feet away. "Jacob, I'll be back," Kara shot back, still clutching her phone. "I need a reset." "A reset?" The word felt foreign in my mouth, inappropriate. He needs his mother. He needs a mother who isn't bitter and exhausted. Her lips pressed into a thin line. I can't keep giving when I'm running on empty. I looked at our son, so small in that hospital bed. Last night, he'd cried for hours as the nausea hit, his little body racked with pain no child should know. I'd held the basin while he vomited, wiped his face, and told him stories until he finally drifted off. Kara had gone to the cafeteria and never returned. "So cocktails and massages will cure you?" I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. "Don't twist this." She stood, straightening her designer blouse that somehow never seemed to wrinkle. "I deserve happiness too." I thought of my Air Force days, of missions where we never left a man behind, of the oath I'd made to protect what mattered. How could she not see that our son, fighting for his life, mattered more than her happiness right now? "Then you'll deserve what comes with it," I said quietly. Something flickered across her face. Uncertainty, maybe, or guilt, but it disappeared as quickly as it had come. She grabbed her purse from the windowsill. "My flight's at 10 on Thursday. I've already packed." She glanced at Ethan, then back to me. "The resort has great Wi-Fi. I'll video call." I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't wake our son. Kara hesitated at the door, as if waiting for my blessing or forgiveness. When neither came, she left without another word. It was midnight when Ethan's fever spiked. I pressed the call button, and nurses rushed in with medication and cool cloths. He whimpered, disoriented and scared, his eyes searching the room. "Where's Mom?" he asked, his voice small and raspy. "She had to step out, buddy." I squeezed his hand. "But I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." He nodded, trusting me completely. The nurses worked efficiently around us, adjusting medications and checking vitals. Once they left, I helped Ethan sip water through a straw, watching his throat work with each painful swallow. By morning, his fever had broken, but the nausea returned with a vengeance. I held him through it all, my shirt soaked with both our tears. The chair beside us, Kara's chair, remained empty. When Ethan finally drifted back to sleep, exhausted from fighting, I looked at that empty chair and felt something harden inside me. "I'll protect you," I whispered to my son, my voice barely audible over the beeping monitors. No matter what. The hospital nights blended together. I'd gotten used to the sounds, the steady beep of monitors, the squeak of nurses' shoes on linoleum, the hum of fluorescent lights that never fully dimmed. What I couldn't get used to was watching my son suffer. "Dad!" Ethan's voice was barely a whisper as he stirred from restless sleep. "I'm right here, buddy." I leaned forward, my hand already reaching for the plastic basin beside the bed. His face contorted, that telltale look I'd come to recognize. I slipped my arm behind his shoulders, lifting him slightly as his body convulsed. There wasn't much left in his stomach, but the chemo didn't care. I held his wrist steady where the IV was taped, making sure the needle didn't pull as he heaved into the bucket. "You're doing great," I murmured, wiping his mouth with a damp cloth when he finished. "The nurse said this round might be the roughest, but that means it's working. Fighting those bad cells." Ethan nodded weakly, his eyes half closed. "Is Mom coming today?" The question stung worse than any physical pain I'd ever felt. "Not today, bud. Remember she's on that trip? But she'll call soon." He didn't respond, just closed his eyes again. I tucked the thin hospital blanket around him, remembering how he used to kick off his dinosaur comforter at home, claiming he was too hot for blankets. Now he was always cold. When he finally drifted back to sleep, I pulled out my phone. 3 days since Kara had left. No calls, no texts asking how Ethan was doing, just social media updates for everyone to see what a wonderful time she was having. Her latest post showed her lounging by an infinity pool, the Caribbean stretching endlessly blue behind her. A full champagne flute perched delicately in her manicured hand. The caption read, "Self-care isn't selfish. Arders blessed Prizer's wellness journey." I took a screenshot, saving it to the folder I'd created. Beside it, I kept a running log. Thursday, 2:13 p.m. Ethan receiving second dose of methotrexate. Vomited twice. Fever 101.3. Kara at resort pool with champagne. The next day brought more. Kara wrapped in a plush robe outside a spa cabana, her face glowing from some treatment that probably cost more than our monthly mortgage. Ethan had spent that same hour crying because his gums hurt too much to eat the Jell-O I'd tried to coax into him. Screenshot. Save to folder. By the 5th day, something changed in her posts. A man appeared in the background of her sunset yoga photo on the beach. Tall, tanned, with the kind of casual confidence that probably worked well at hotel bars. The next post, he was closer, standing beside her at a restaurant, their cocktail glasses raised toward the camera. His name was Norbert, according to the tags. His profile showed he was a yoga instructor, married, with a studio back home in Denver. But there he was, his arm gradually finding its way around my wife's waist in photo after photo. "Best company, unexpected surprise." Kara captioned one image of them laughing together, the resort's tiki bar lit with string lights behind them. I remembered the summer we painted our kitchen together, how Kara had flicked a spot of yellow paint onto my nose, and we'd ended up in a laughing heap on the tarp-covered floor. That same smile she now gave to a stranger, while our son fought for his life 3,000 miles away. Screenshot. Save to folder. On the 7th day, I sat in the hospital waiting room while they changed Ethan's sheets. My finger scrolled mechanically through Kara's latest updates. There they were at a beachside restaurant, sunset reflecting off their wine glasses, Norbert's hand visible on her thigh under the table. The next morning, matching coffee mugs on a balcony overlooking the ocean, her oceanfront suite that I was still paying for. Each image, each smiling selfie, and flirtatious comment landed like a physical blow. But I kept taking screenshots, noting timestamps, saving everything. I pulled up the hospital's patient portal, downloading Ethan's treatment schedule, medication logs, and temperature charts. I placed them side by side with Kara's vacation timeline in my growing digital folder. She was sipping mojitos while you had your port flushed, I whispered to no one. She was getting a hot stone massage while you cried from the mouth sores. The nurse called my name, letting me know I could return to Ethan's room. Before standing, I took one last look at my phone. A new post from Kara. Her and Norbert on the beach at sunset, his lips pressed against her cheek, her eyes closed in a moment of what looked like genuine happiness. I felt strangely calm as I saved this final piece to my collection. The betrayal was so complete, so undeniable, that it had transcended pain and settled into cold clarity. "You've given me everything I need," I whispered to the screen, then slipped the phone into my pocket and went back to my son. 2 days later, I finally left the hospital, not to go home, but to visit a lawyer. My mother had arrived that morning, her silver hair pulled back in a practical bun, a small suitcase containing enough clothes for a week. She'd taken one look at me and practically pushed me toward the door. "Jacob, you look like you haven't slept in days," she said, settling into the chair beside Ethan's bed. "Go. Take care of what you need to. We'll be fine." Ethan had barely stirred when I kissed his forehead goodbye. The meds kept him sleeping most of the time now, which was a blessing, I supposed. Less time awake meant less time in pain. Paula Jang's office was in a converted Victorian house downtown, the kind of place that looked warm and approachable from the outside, but housed a razor-sharp legal mind within. I'd found her through a hospital social worker who'd seen too many families fractured by illness. "Mr. Hollis," she said, rising from behind her desk when her assistant showed me in. Her handshake was firm, direct. "Please, have a seat." I placed my laptop on her desk, along with a manila folder stuffed with printed screenshots. "I don't know if this is enough," I said. Paula sat back down, crossing her legs beneath her neat gray suit. "Why don't you start from the beginning? Tell me what you're hoping to achieve." The story poured out of me. Ethan's diagnosis, Kara's reset trip, the stranger named Norbert who'd somehow become the center of my wife's vacation. As I talked, Paula took notes, her face betraying nothing. "And here," I said, pulling up our bank records on my laptop, 3 withdrawals from Ethan's medical fund, $2,000 for the resort booking, $1,800 for the spa package, nearly $1,000 in restaurant charges. Paula nodded. "Courts care about facts, Mr. Hollis, not emotions. What you're showing me is a parent who abandoned a critically ill child for personal pleasure, depleted resources meant for that child's care, and engaged in infidelity during that abandonment. Is it enough?" I asked. "It's the beginning of a solid case," she said, sliding on reading glasses to examine my folder of screenshots. "These timestamps are excellent documentation. The contrast between hospital logs and her vacation activities tells a compelling story." I remembered how it felt seeing those posts while sitting next to Ethan's IV stand. "She hasn't even called to check on him, not once." "Document that too," Paula said firmly. "Every missed call, every unanswered text about his condition. Courts want to see patterns of behavior, not isolated incidents. She spent the next hour outlining a strategy, gathering witness statements, securing financial records, building a case for emergency custody when Kara eventually returned. "Your mother is staying with Ethan now?" she asked. "Yes, she's taken family leave from her teaching job. She'll be with us, at least through this round of treatment." "Good. Her observations will be valuable. Ask her to keep a written log of her time with Ethan, his needs, his questions about his mother, everything." I nodded, remembering my mother's face when I'd shown her Kara's vacation photos. The quiet disappointment had been worse than any anger. "I've also asked my neighbor Walt to keep an eye on the house," I said. "He's retired, home most days. He's been watching Kara's comings and goings for years, or lack thereof when it comes to Ethan's appointments." Paula made another note. "Another potential witness. The courts appreciate third-party observations." She pulled several forms from a drawer and placed them on the desk between us. "Now, Mr. Hollis, I need to prepare you. When Kara returns, she won't simply accept whatever terms you set. She'll likely claim you're alienating her, that you're exaggerating her absence, that you've misrepresented her relationship with this Norbert person. But I have proof." "Yes, and that matters. But so does your behavior from this point forward. You must remain calm, rational, and child-focused, no matter what she says or does. Document everything, but don't engage in arguments. Don't make threats. Let the evidence speak for itself." I thought about Ethan, how small he looked in that hospital bed, how he still asked for Kara sometimes before falling asleep. The thought of him waiting for someone who chose a beach fling over his bedside made my jaw clench. Paula seemed to read my thoughts. "Your anger is justified, Mr. Hollis, but channel it productively." She slid a stack of documents across her desk, their edges crisp and official. "These are temporary custody papers, financial protection orders, and a request for supervised visitation when she returns. Review them, sign where indicated, and we'll file immediately." I stared at the papers, the weight of what I was doing suddenly very real. "When Kara comes back, she won't walk quietly," Paula warned. "Be ready." The night before Kara was scheduled to return, I sat at our kitchen table with a locksmith named Dennis. 3 new deadbolts lay on the surface between us, along with a small stack of shiny keys. "You sure about this, man?" Dennis asked, scratching his beard. "Usually do these after people are already divorced." "I'm sure," I said, sliding the invoice toward me to sign. "And I need the security cameras installed tonight, too." Dennis nodded. No more questions. I appreciated that about him. He wasn't here to judge, just to do the job. I glanced at my phone, checking the time. It was almost 9, and my mother had texted that Ethan was finally asleep at the hospital. The doctors had adjusted his medication, and he'd had a better day. Small victories. "I'll have the old ones out in 20 minutes, Dennis said, gathering his tools. While he worked, I called Walt. "Camera's going in tonight," I told him when he answered. "She lands tomorrow at 1:30. "I'll be on my porch from noon," Walt replied. His voice was gruff but steady. "Got my coffee thermos ready. Won't miss a thing." "Thanks, Walt. I don't know what I'd do without—" "Don't mention it," he cut me off. "That boy needs someone looking out for him. Should have been his mother. But here we are." After hanging up, I walked through each room of the house, mentally preparing. The home felt hollowed out somehow, not just from Kara's absence, but from the weight of what had been revealed. How could someone live among these family photos, these toys, these reminders of responsibility, then walk away when things got hard? I remembered how the house smelled like ginger ale and crackers the week before Ethan's diagnosis, when we thought he just had a stubborn flu. Kara had been there then, heating soup, checking temperatures. Where was that woman now? Had she ever really existed? Dennis installed the cameras at the front door and driveway, showing me how to access the feed from my phone. By midnight, the house was secured. New locks, new cameras, new boundaries. I slept maybe 3 hours total. The next afternoon, I stood in the kitchen, watching Walt take up his position on his front porch across the street. Right on time. My phone buzzed, a text from Paula confirming our meeting tomorrow. The envelope with the mediation paperwork sat ready on the counter, along with printouts of the most damning photos. Kara with Norbert at the bar, their arms around each other, champagne glasses raised. At 2:47, my phone alerted me to motion in the driveway. On the screen, I watched Kara's Uber roll to a stop. She stepped out in a flowing sundress, her skin golden brown from Caribbean sun. Even through the security feed, I could see the relaxed smile on her face, the look of someone returning from vacation, not someone who'd abandoned her sick child. I moved to the front door and waited. 2 minutes later, I heard the scrape of her key in the lock, followed by confusion as it failed to turn. Then another attempt, more forceful. Finally, knocking. I opened the door but stood blocking the entrance. Kara's smile faltered. "What's wrong with the lock?" she asked, pushing a pair of oversized sunglasses up into her hair. "The lock is fine," I said. "Your key doesn't work anymore." Her eyes widened. "You changed the locks on me?" "Yes. This is my house too, Jacob." She tried to step around me, but I didn't move. "Let me in." "No." She stepped back, looking at me like I'd lost my mind. "Excuse me? Where's Ethan? I want to see my son." "You can see Ethan through mediation. Paula Jang's office has the details." Kara laughed, a bitter, incredulous sound. "You changed the locks on me," she repeated. "Are you serious right now?" I kept my voice level, remembering Paula's advice. "You left while Ethan was puking into a bucket. You don't get a key to this life anymore." "I carried him for 9 months," she snapped, her vacation glow replaced by a flush of anger. "I was sick every day with him. I gave up my body, my career, everything. And you think you can lock me out after one trip?" "You carried him then," I said quietly. "I carry him now." I reached inside the door and took the envelope from the side table where I'd placed it. "These are the mediation dates," I said, holding it out to her. "And some photos I thought you might want to explain to the judge." Kara snatched the envelope and tore it open. Her face went slack as she flipped through the photos. Her and Norbert. Cocktails. Beach. His arm around her waist. "You spied on me," she hissed. "You posted it all publicly. Not my fault you forgot I follow you." She shuffled through the images until she reached the mediation paperwork. When she saw the custody terms, something snapped. "You manipulative bastard," she snarled, and slapped the envelope from my hands, sending papers fluttering across the porch. I'd never been in family court before. The room was smaller than I expected, with wood paneling that reminded me of the principal's office in my old high school. I sat beside Paula Yang at a polished table. My folder of evidence spread neatly before us. Kara and her attorney, a sleek-looking man named Lawrence Brenner, sat at the opposite table. Kara wore a pale blue dress I'd never seen before. Her hair was pulled back, and she'd toned down her makeup to look more maternal. She kept her eyes down, occasionally dabbing at them with a tissue. Good performance. I wondered if she'd practiced it. "All rise," the bailiff called, as Judge Marion Ellis entered, a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and reading glasses on a chain. Paula had prepared me well. We'd rehearsed our statements, organized our evidence chronologically, and assembled a compelling narrative of Ethan's medical needs versus Kara's abandonment. Still, my heart hammered as the proceedings began. "Your Honor," Paula began after the preliminaries, "this is a case about a child's critical need for stability during life-threatening illness, and one parent's choice to prioritize a vacation fling over that child's care." Kara's attorney objected immediately, calling the characterization inflammatory, but Judge Ellis merely nodded and asked Paula to proceed with the evidence. Dr. Ahmad was our first witness. He entered wearing his white coat, his demeanor calm and professional. After establishing his credentials as Ethan's oncologist, Paula guided him through his testimony. In your medical opinion, Dr. Ahmad, is it important for a child undergoing chemotherapy to have consistent caregivers present? Absolutely critical, he replied. These treatments are traumatic physically and emotionally. Children need familiar faces, consistent routines, and caregivers who understand their specific medical needs. And during Ethan Hollis's treatment in April, who was present with him? Dr. Ahmad glanced toward me. Mr. Hollis was present for every treatment and overnight stay. His mother, Grace Hollis, was there when Mr. Hollis needed to shower or change clothes. Mrs. Hollis was not present during this treatment cycle. Did Ethan ask for his mother? Dr. Ahmad's expression softened. Yes, several times during periods of intense discomfort. When Kara's attorney cross-examined, trying to suggest that mothers need self-care too, Dr. Ahmad remained firm. Self-care is important, but abandoning a child during active cancer treatment goes well beyond reasonable self-care. My mother was next. She brought her journals, 3 composition books filled with detailed notes on Ethan's medications, symptoms, meals, and moods, date and time stamped. Every entry in her neat teacher's handwriting. I kept these logs because Jacob needed sleep, she explained. We worked in shifts, so Ethan would never be alone. Her voice cracked when Paula asked about Kara's communication during this time. She sent a few texts asking how he was. Nothing more. Never called the hospital room phone. Walt's written statement came next. A simple timeline of when he'd observed me leaving for the hospital and returning home, when he'd seen Kara leave with her suitcase, and confirming she hadn't returned until the day I changed the locks. Throughout it all, I kept my emotions in check, just as Paula had instructed. I answered questions directly, presented the financial records showing Kara's resort charges against our medical savings, and described Ethan's treatment schedule without embellishment. Judge Ellis reviewed everything, occasionally looking over her glasses at Kara, whose tissue dabbing had increased as our evidence mounted. When the judge finally spoke, her voice was measured but firm. Based on the evidence presented, I am granting temporary full custody to Jacob Hollis, with supervised visitation for Kara Hollis twice weekly at the visitation center. She tapped her pen against her notepad. Furthermore, Mrs. Hollis will reimburse the medical savings account in full within 30 days. This arrangement will be reviewed in 3 months, pending Ethan's medical status. She looked directly at Kara. Mrs. Hollis, the court recognizes that parenting a seriously ill child is incredibly difficult. However, children need consistency, especially during medical crises. Your decision-making demonstrated concerning priorities. Relief washed through me. It wasn't over. Temporary custody meant we'd be back, but Ethan was protected for now. Dad, can I have another one? Ethan asked that evening, pointing at the stack of pancakes between us. We sat at Maple's Diner, celebrating with breakfast for dinner. It was Ethan's favorite place. They made pancakes shaped like dinosaurs and cars. One more, buddy. Then we need to get home for your medicine. He nodded, sliding another pancake onto his plate and drowning it in syrup. A glob dripped down his chin, and he giggled as he wiped it away. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, his smile reached his eyes. The court hearing had stressed me beyond measure, but Ethan knew nothing about it. He only knew that Dad had promised pancakes, and Dad had delivered. Will Mom ever come with us again? He asked suddenly. Fork paused mid-air. The question knocked the wind out of me. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that his mother chose a stranger over him? That she emptied his medical fund for spa treatments while he threw up from chemo? You don't. Not yet. I reached across the table and squeezed his small hand. He looked up at me, waiting for an answer I couldn't give. Let's focus on getting you better first, I said softly. One day at a time, okay? He seemed to accept this, returning to his syrup-soaked pancake. I smiled faintly, watching him enjoy this simple pleasure. grateful for this moment of normalcy amidst the chaos. I should have known the victory was temporary. A week after the hearing, I received notice that Kara had hired a new attorney, Veronica Marsh, known locally as the Scorcher for her aggressive family court tactics. The paperwork cited parental alienation and prevention of mother-child contact. "It's a standard play," Paula explained when I called her in a panic. "They're claiming you've poisoned Ethan against his mother." "That's ridiculous. I've never said a bad word about her to him." "I know that, but they'll twist anything they can." "Has Kara been attending her supervised visits?" I sighed. "Just one. She showed up 20 minutes late, spent half the time on her phone, then told the supervisor she felt uncomfortable with the arrangement. Document everything," Paula advised. "Every missed visit, every late arrival. We'll need it." What I didn't expect was Doris getting involved. Kara's mother had always maintained a polite distance from our family life, content to swoop in for holidays and birthdays with expensive gifts and backhanded compliments. Now, suddenly, she was the star witness in Kara's countersuit. The emergency hearing was scheduled for Friday morning. I sat with Paula as Doris took the stand, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, diamond earrings catching the fluorescent court lights. "Jacob has always been controlling," she testified, her voice trembling with what I recognized as practiced emotion. "Even before Ethan's illness, he monitored Kara's spending, limited her social activities, and made all the important decisions. This lockout is just another example of his pattern of control." My jaw clenched so hard my teeth ached. I'd never monitored Kara's spending until she started draining our accounts. And social activities? She went out with friends whenever she wanted. "And how often did you observe Mr. Hollis with his son?" Kara's attorney asked. "Not often. He always seemed distant, cold even." Kara was the one who handled bath time, bedtime stories, all the nurturing aspects of parenting. I gripped the edge of the table. This woman had visited maybe 6 times a year, usually just long enough to criticize our house before taking Kara shopping. When Paula cross-examined her, Doris fumbled over basic questions about Ethan's medical routine, his favorite books, even his allergies. She couldn't name his oncologist or recall when his diagnosis had come. But the real blow came when Kara's attorney played a video clip on her tablet for the judge. It showed Ethan in his hospital bed, looking small against the white sheets, his voice weak as he asked, "Where's Mommy?" "I want Mommy." The clip cut off there, conveniently omitting what I remembered followed: my explanation that Mommy was away, and Ethan's brave nod before asking if we could read another chapter of his dinosaur book. The judge frowned, making notes. I felt like I was drowning. "Your Honor," Paula interjected, "we'd like to see the complete unedited video. This appears to be selectively cut." The request was granted, but the damage was done. By the time we left court, the judge had ordered a Child Protective Services evaluation and additional supervised visits for Kara. Nothing had been decided permanently, but the ground beneath me felt shakier than before. 2 days later, a CPS caseworker named Bridget appeared at the hospital. She was kind but thorough, watching how I interacted with Ethan, examining the small bag of personal items I kept at his bedside, questioning the nurses about my consistency. "You're doing everything right," Nurse Melissa whispered to me when Bridget stepped out to make a call. "We see who's here every day and who isn't." Still, the pressure felt like a vice around my chest. That night, after Bridget left and the hospital quieted for evening, Ethan's temperature spiked suddenly. 103, then 104. The monitors shrieked as his heart rate climbed dangerously high. I punched the call button repeatedly, my voice breaking as I shouted, "He's burning up! Someone help!" Nurses rushed in wearing masks, moving with practiced urgency. Dr. Ahmad arrived moments later, barking orders for medication, ice packs, blood cultures. "Neutropenic fever," I heard someone say. "Possible infection." I gripped Ethan's limp, hot hand as they worked around us. His eyes fluttered open once, confused and frightened. "Dad's right here," I promised. "I'm not going anywhere." More medication, more monitoring. An hour passed, then 2. Finally, his temperature began to drop, decimal point by decimal point. By midnight, it had stabilized at 100.2, not normal, but no longer critical. "Doctor," Ahmad placed a hand on my shoulder. "We caught it early. That's crucial with neutropenic fever. We've started broad-spectrum antibiotics while we wait for the culture results." When they finally cleared out, leaving just one nurse to monitor him, I stepped into the hallway for a moment of privacy. My legs gave out, and I slid down the wall, head in my hands. What if I hadn't been there when his fever spiked? What if the court had given Kara unsupervised time, and she'd been off somewhere while this happened? Worse, what if her lies and manipulations actually worked? What if some judge who didn't know us, who hadn't lived through every terrifying moment of Ethan's treatment, believed her distorted version of reality? I pressed my palms against my eyes, whispering into the empty corridor. What if her lies take him away from me? 2 days later, I sat in Paula's office, my hands shaking as I sipped lukewarm coffee. Ethan was stable again, the infection caught early enough to prevent serious complications. Grace had stayed with him so I could meet with Paula before our next court date. The temporary orders are in our favor. But Kara's playing hardball now, Paula said, straightening papers on her desk. We need to stay steady, Jacob. No angry texts, no confrontations, even when she provokes you. I nodded, too exhausted to speak. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, reminding me of the constant hospital hum I'd grown accustomed to. You're doing exactly what you should be, Paula continued, her voice softening. Being there for Ethan, documenting everything. The truth is, on our side. I pulled out my phone, swiping to an app. I've got more. Remember those AirTags I bought last Christmas, when we kept losing our luggage? Paula leaned forward, suddenly alert. Kara never removed hers from her suitcase, I explained. I have location logs confirming exactly where she was, time-stamped, for the entire trip. I slid my phone across the desk, showing Paula the neat timeline that matched perfectly with my other evidence. Each ping placed Kara at specific resort locations: the beachfront bar, the North Villa section, the adults-only pool. Perfect, Paula murmured, taking screenshots. This corroborates everything. From my briefcase, I pulled out a folder labeled Receipts and spread them across her desk. All these were charged to our joint card. Look at the timestamps. Paula examined the papers. Champagne brunches at $250 each, cabana rentals, multiple spa treatments. She lingered on one receipt, timed at 2:13 a.m., 2 tropical cocktails, and an appetizer platter delivered to Kara's room. Room service for 2, Paula noted. At 2 in the morning. While I was sleeping in a hospital chair, I added, the bitterness rising in my throat despite my efforts to stay calm. I remembered those nights, the constant beeping of monitors, Ethan's small body curled against stiff sheets, nurses coming in every few hours to check vitals. The memory of his fevered whimpers contrasted sharply with images of Kara sipping cocktails under the stars. And here's what clinches it, I said, pulling up the photo folder on my phone. Screenshots of her social media, text messages she sent me, and photos where Norbert appears. Paula scrolled through them methodically. Kara and Norbert with champagne glasses raised, his arm around her waist at the beach bar, her laughing up at him in the sunset. Then, the text messages where she claimed she was just resting at the resort and getting some needed alone time. We've subpoenaed Norbert, Paula said. But frankly, I don't expect him to show. Men like that rarely do. She paused, studying me carefully, before continuing. His wife, however, received a package yesterday. Anonymous, of course, but containing select portions of what you've shown me. I raised an eyebrow. I don't need to know details, Paula said with a knowing look. But it seems Norbert is facing his own domestic crisis. His yoga studio's Instagram has gone dark, and his wife has changed her relationship status. Despite everything, I felt no satisfaction, just emptiness where trust had once lived. Tomorrow in court, Kara will likely stick to her story that this was just self-care and that Norbert was a friend she happened to meet, Paula said. Be prepared for that. I nodded, remembering how Kara could make anything sound reasonable when she wanted to. How she'd once convinced me that spending our anniversary weekend with her college friends was actually a gift to me. Quality alone time. When you testify, Paula continued, speak directly to the judge. Keep your voice steady. No matter what Kara claims, we have the evidence to counter it. The next morning in court, I watched Kara take the stand in a conservative blue dress, her hair pulled back, looking nothing like the woman who'd posed for beachside selfies with a stranger. I was overwhelmed, she told the judge, her voice quavering perfectly. Any mother would understand the emotional toll of watching your child suffer. I needed a few days to center myself so I could be strong for Ethan. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. I met a friend at the resort. We talked. He understood what I was going through. I clenched my jaw, remembering the photo of them pressed together at the bar, her head thrown back in laughter while Ethan lay connected to IV fluids. Mrs. Hollis, the judge asked, did you inform the hospital of your whereabouts? Did you check in with your son's doctors? I called Jacob for updates, she said, avoiding the question. When she finally stepped down, Paula squeezed my arm gently. Your turn, she whispered. I stood, straightening my tie, ready to deliver my testimony, ready to expose every lie, word for word. I rose from my seat, straightening my tie. The courtroom felt too warm, too close. Every eye tracked me as I moved to the stand. Kara stared at me from her table, a perfect picture of controlled distress in her modest blue dress. Nothing like the woman who'd posted sunset cocktail photos while our son fought for his life. After being sworn in, I sat down and faced the judge directly. Paula nodded slightly, our signal to begin. Mr. Hollis, she said, can you describe the period when your wife left for her Caribbean trip? Ethan had just started his second round of chemotherapy, I answered, my voice steadier than I felt. He was experiencing severe side effects, vomiting, fever, fatigue. I was sleeping at the hospital every night. And Mrs. Hollis's involvement during this time? She visited 3 times that week, for less than an hour each time. Then she announced she'd booked herself a 10-day trip to a Caribbean resort. Paula walked closer. Did she consult you about this trip? No, she had already booked it. And the expenses? I swallowed hard. She withdrew $4,200 from our joint account and charged another $3,800 to our credit card. That includes $1,200 from Ethan's medical fund. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. The judge silenced them with a glance. During her absence, who cared for Ethan? I did, with help from my mother when I needed to shower or change clothes. Paula nodded, then displayed the first exhibit, a timeline showing Ethan's treatment schedule alongside Kara's social media posts. Mr. Hollis, can you explain what we're seeing here? I pointed to each entry. This shows when Ethan was receiving chemotherapy, when he had fever spikes, and when he needed emergency anti-nausea medication. The right column shows Kara's posts from the resort, spa treatments, sunset yoga, champagne brunches. Paula moved methodically through the evidence, receipts, timestamps, location data. Finally, she pulled up the photos of Kara and Norbert. Did you know this man prior to seeing these images? No. I'd never seen or heard of him before. And based on these photos, how would you characterize their relationship? I looked directly at Kara. Not as friends. Kara's attorney objected, claiming speculation. The judge overruled it, noting the photographic evidence. When Paula finished, Kara's attorney rose for cross-examination. Mr. Hollis, isn't it true that my client supported your family financially for years while you were deployed? No, I replied. I sent my entire military salary home. Kara worked part-time as a receptionist for 18 months, then quit. He shifted tactics. Has my client been a loving mother to Ethan throughout his life? Until his diagnosis, yes. Isn't it possible that the stress of watching her child suffer became unbearable, and she needed this brief respite to continue functioning as a mother? I met his eyes directly. If that were true, she wouldn't have spent her days drinking champagne with a stranger while her son asked for her every night. When cross-examination ended, the judge called a brief recess. Dr. Ahmad testified next, explaining the importance of consistent caregiving during pediatric cancer treatment. Children with present, engaged caregivers show better treatment outcomes, he stated firmly. Ethan's stability relies heavily on routine and familiar support. Grace followed, submitting her detailed journals, documenting each hospital stay, medication time, and Ethan's reactions. Her steady voice carried authority born from countless hours at Ethan's bedside. Walt testified about watching our house, confirming I'd spent every night at the hospital while Kara was gone. Never saw her checking in, not once, he said. Just Jacob, looking more exhausted each day. As witnesses finished, the judge asked if Kara wished to make a final statement. She rose, composed, and rehearsed. Your Honor, I made a mistake in timing. I needed healing, self-care, to be whole again for my family. I found companionship with Norbert, someone who understood my pain when I felt so alone. The judge then turned to me. Mr. Hollis? I stood slowly, the weight of every sleepless hospital night in my voice. A friend? I said, looking directly at Kara. You met a stranger at a bar while Ethan begged for you. You call that healing. I call it desertion. The courtroom fell silent. Paula rose once more, laying out the timeline piece by piece. Each moment Kara chose herself over our son. Each lie she told. Each dollar she spent. The evidence speaks for itself, Your Honor, Paula concluded. Mr. Hollis remained present, while Mrs. Hollis abandoned her critically ill child for a vacation fling. The judge sat quietly for a moment, reviewing her notes. The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the silence. I watched her face, searching for any hint of her thoughts, but found only careful consideration. Finally, she set down her pen and reached for her gavel. The wooden handle rose in her hand, poised to deliver the final ruling. The gavel came down with a sharp crack that echoed through the courtroom. Having reviewed all evidence and testimony, the judge began, her voice steady and clear. This court finds that the best interests of Ethan Hollis are served by awarding sole legal and physical custody to Jacob Hollis. I exhaled slowly, feeling weight lift from my shoulders even as my hands trembled slightly against the table. Furthermore, she continued, Kara Hollis is ordered to repay all funds withdrawn from the child's medical account, with interest, within 30 days. Visitation will be supervised twice monthly, contingent upon her completion of family counseling. Paula squeezed my arm gently. I nodded, unable to speak as relief washed over me. The judge addressed Kara directly. Mrs. Hollis, this court does not pass judgment on your need for self-care. However, the manner and timing of your absence, combined with financial decisions that impacted your child's medical fund, demonstrate a concerning pattern of prioritization. She removed her glasses. The court expects strict adherence to these orders. As we gathered our papers, Kara stood frozen at her table, her attorney whispering urgently in her ear. The room began to empty. I thanked Paula, promising to call her office tomorrow, then turned to leave. Kara caught me in the hallway, her face pale beneath her tan. For a moment, she looked like the woman I'd married, vulnerable, uncertain. Then her eyes hardened. You ruined me, she whispered, her voice breaking. You took everything. I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in months. I saw someone I no longer recognized, someone who had walked away when our son needed her most. You ruined yourself, Kara, I replied coldly. I just showed the truth. I walked away without looking back. Mom was waiting with Ethan at home, and I wouldn't waste another minute on someone who'd already wasted too many of ours. The weeks that followed felt like learning to breathe again after being underwater. I returned to work part-time while Mom helped with Ethan. His blood counts improved steadily, and Dr. Ahmad cautiously suggested we might be turning a corner. Saturday pancake breakfasts returned, a tradition we'd abandoned during the worst of the chaos. I'd flip the pancakes extra high, making Ethan laugh, that pure kid laugh that had disappeared for too long. "Higher, Dad," he'd call, syrup already smeared across his chin. "To the ceiling." If I hit the ceiling, "Who's gonna clean it?" I'd ask, flipping another one that spun in midair. "Not me," he'd giggle, and for those moments, cancer was just a word, not the center of our universe. Mom began spending Sunday afternoons with us rather than just the medical appointments. Walt dropped by with his homemade root beer and stories that made Ethan howl with laughter. Slowly, our home filled with sound again. 2 months after the hearing, Ethan's scans showed significant improvement. We celebrated with ice cream sundaes bigger than his head, and he fell asleep that night clutching his favorite dinosaur toy, a smile on his face even in sleep. Kara's life took a different turn. She drifted between borrowed apartments, showing up for her supervised visits with gifts that couldn't bridge what she'd broken. She spoke of another reset trip she was planning, still chasing happiness as though it were something to be found rather than built. Norbert's collapse was more complete. His wife had been thorough once she received the evidence package, filing for divorce and taking half his business with her. His yoga studio hemorrhaged clients after his name surfaced in court records. His Instagram, once filled with inspirational quotes about living your truth, went dark. They had both gambled with other people's lives and lost everything that mattered. On Ethan's 7th birthday, we had a small party in the backyard. He'd gained back some weight, and tufts of hair were returning across his scalp. As he blew out his candles, his face glowing in the light, I realized something important. We hadn't just survived. We were healing. You know, Kara once told me she deserved happiness. It was her justification for everything: the trip, the affair, the money she took. In the end, she got exactly what she deserved. So did Norbert. They chose themselves when others needed them most, and now they're alone with those choices. I wonder sometimes, if someone abandons you in the middle of your darkest storm, walks away when you're fighting for what matters most, would you ever give them a key back? Would you open the door to someone who proved they'll leave when staying gets hard? I know my answer now. Maybe you're finding yours too. I believe stories such as this find us for a reason. If this one touches you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day. In the meantime, there are 2 stories on the screen that are even better.